Jericho looked impossible to defeat. Massive walls surrounded the city. Soldiers guarded its gates. Families lived behind stone defenses that had protected them for generations. But inside those walls lived a woman who was about to discover that no wall could protect a city from the God of Israel. Her name was Rahab. Scripture introduces her in one of the most dramatic moments in Israel's history. She lived in Jericho, a city standing directly between Israel and the Promised Land. And nobody looking at her circumstances would have guessed the role she was about to play. Rahab was not introduced as a queen, prophet, soldier, or priest. She came from an ordinary and complicated life inside a pagan city. Yet God was about to use someone nobody expected to become one of the most remembered women of faith in Scripture. Jericho was filled with confidence. Its walls were enormous. Its people believed their city was secure. But beyond those walls, Israel was approaching. And Israel carried something far more powerful than weapons, the reputation of the God who had already defeated mighty kingdoms. Joshua knew what stood ahead. Before Israel attacked Jericho, he secretly sent 2 men to investigate the city. Their mission was dangerous. They would enter enemy territory, gather information, and somehow return alive. The 2 spies entered Jericho and eventually came to the house of Rahab. They probably expected danger. What they could not have known was that their meeting with this woman would become one of the turning points in the entire conquest of Canaan. But their presence did not remain secret. Word reached the king of Jericho. 2 Israelite men had entered the city, and they had gone to Rahab's house. The king immediately sent men to Rahab. They demanded that she bring the spies out. At that moment, Rahab stood between 2 authorities, the king standing outside her door, and the God of Israel whose power she had only begun to understand. Rahab had a choice. She could surrender the spies and protect herself, or she could protect them and risk everything. This was the defining struggle of her life. Who would she trust? Rahab chose. She took the 2 spies and hid them beneath stalks of flax on the roof. Then she faced the king's representatives and protected the men they were searching for. The king's men searched for the spies, but Rahab sent them toward the road leading out of the city. The soldiers left, believing the spies had escaped. Rahab had bought them time. Now the danger had passed for a moment. Rahab climbed to the roof and approached the hidden spies. What she said next reveals that something had already changed inside her heart. Rahab told them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land." She was not guessing. She had heard the reports, and the reports had convinced her that Israel's God was unlike any power Jericho had ever faced. Rahab remembered the story of the Red Sea. She had heard how the Lord dried up the waters before Israel and brought his people through. The miracle had happened far away, years earlier, yet its reputation had reached Jericho. Rahab said the people of Jericho had heard what God had done. Their courage was melting away. The city still looked strong from the outside, but inside its people were terrified. Then Rahab made an extraordinary declaration. She recognized that the Lord was God in heaven, above and on the earth beneath. Her understanding of God had begun with stories, but those stories had produced conviction. But Rahab did not stop with belief. She asked the spies for mercy. If Jericho was going to fall, she wanted her family to survive. She asked them to spare her father, her mother, her brothers, her sisters, and everyone connected to them. Her first instinct was not simply self-preservation. She wanted her family rescued too. The spies agreed, but there would be conditions. Rahab had to keep their mission secret, and when Israel attacked, her family had to remain inside her house. There would be a visible sign. A scarlet cord would hang from Rahab's window. It would identify the house where protection had been promised. Rahab's house was positioned along the city wall. She brought the spies to the window and prepared a way for them to escape. Her courage was now turning into action. She lowered the spies from the window. Then she gave them directions. They were to hide in the mountains until their pursuers returned. Rahab watched until the spies disappeared into the darkness. The danger had not ended. In fact, the greatest danger was still coming. The spies eventually returned to Joshua. Their report confirmed what Rahab already believed. Jericho was terrified, and they declared that the Lord had given the land into Israel's hands. Back inside Jericho, Rahab waited. She had done everything she could. Now she had to trust the promise she had received. The days passed. Rahab could not see the Israelite army clearly from inside her home. She could only wait, obey, and trust. Then the Israelites appeared. They approached Jericho as an organized army, but they did not immediately attack. Instead, they began marching around the city. One day passed, then another. The Israelites marched. Jericho watched. Rahab waited. Nobody inside the city could fully understand what was happening. Waiting tested Rahab's faith. She had already acted courageously, but now she had to remain faithful when nothing seemed to be changing. Then came the seventh day. Israel marched around Jericho again and again. The tension reached its highest point. The priests raised their trumpets. The city waited. Rahab and her family remained inside the house, holding on to the promise. Then the people shouted. The sound rolled across the valley, and something impossible happened. The walls of Jericho collapsed. The fortress that had seemed permanent was suddenly broken. The city had trusted its walls, but those walls could not stand against God. Yet among the fallen defenses stood a house marked by a scarlet cord. Rahab's family had waited exactly where they were told to wait. Joshua had not forgotten the promise. He commanded the spies who had entered Rahab's house to go and bring her family out. The spies entered Rahab's house. They found her family alive. The promise had been kept. Rahab walked out of Jericho with her family. Behind her was the city she had known. Ahead was a future she could never have imagined. Rahab had survived the fall of Jericho. But Scripture emphasizes something even more important. She did not simply survive. She began a new life among Israel. The woman who had once been associated with Jericho was now dwelling among God's people. Her environment had changed. Her identity was changing too. But the Bible does not erase Rahab's past. Her story is powerful precisely because Scripture tells us where she started. Rahab did not have a perfect beginning. She did not come from the perfect family. She did not have the perfect reputation. But God was not finished writing her story. Rahab's greatest strength was not physical power. It was discernment. She recognized what others refused to recognize. The God of Israel was greater than Jericho. Rahab was courageous because she acted while afraid. She knew the king could punish her. She knew her decision could cost everything, yet she moved forward. Her faith was not merely an idea. She heard about God, believed what she heard, and then acted on it. Rahab was not a military commander. She had no army. She had no throne. Yet her decision influenced the survival of her entire household. That is leadership without a title. When Rahab had the opportunity to ask for herself, she asked for her family too. Her faith expanded beyond her own survival, but Rahab's story is not simplistic. She lied to the king's representatives. Scripture records the event without pretending that her life was morally uncomplicated. That complexity makes her story more human. Rahab was not a flawless superhero. She was an imperfect person who made a courageous decision and began walking toward a different future. Centuries later, Rahab's name appeared again. Hebrews remembered her as a woman of faith because she welcomed the spies and acted courageously. James also remembered Rahab. Why? Because her faith became visible through what she did. She received the messengers and sent them away safely. Rahab teaches a simple but powerful truth. Faith that never moves may remain only words. Her faith moved her hands. her decisions, and ultimately, her entire future. The scarlet cord became a visible sign of Rahab's decision. She had heard the promise, believed it, and obeyed the instructions she had received. Rahab also teaches us about waiting. After she acted, she still had to wait. The promise did not produce an instant result. Sometimes faith means acting, sometimes faith means waiting. Rahab had to do both. It is easy to remember Rahab because Jericho's walls fell. But the deeper story began before the walls collapsed. The real battle was happening inside Rahab's heart. Would she trust the visible strength of Jericho or the invisible authority of Israel's God? Our walls look different today. Money can become a wall. Status can become a wall. Popularity, education, influence, and connections can all make us feel secure. But Jericho teaches us that visible security is not the same as true security. What looks permanent can disappear in a moment. Rahab's question becomes our question. Who are you trusting when the things around you begin to shake? Rahab did not know everything about Israel. She did not know everything about the future. But she knew enough to make a faithful decision. You may not know everything either. Sometimes you do not need the entire map. You only need enough faith to take the next right step. Rahab's past was real, but her past did not have the final word. Her future was being shaped by the decision she made in the present. Because Rahab acted, her family was given an opportunity to live. One person's courage can sometimes become a doorway of hope for an entire household. That is influence. You do not always need a platform, a title, or thousands of followers. Sometimes influence begins with one courageous decision inside one household. But Rahab's story was about to become much bigger than Jericho. Scripture would eventually connect her name to a family line that reaches all the way toward the New Testament. Matthew's genealogy identifies Rahab as the mother of Boaz. Her name appears within the family line that eventually leads to King David and generations later to Jesus Christ. Think about the journey. A woman from Jericho became part of the family line connected to David, Israel's famous king. And Matthew continues the genealogy until it reaches Jesus. Rahab's story became part of a much larger story of redemption. People may have looked at Rahab and seen her past. Scripture looks deeper. It remembers her courage, her faith, and the decision she made. Rahab reminds us that God can use unexpected people. The person everyone overlooks may become the person whose faith everyone remembers. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Rahab is that she believed before she saw the walls fall. The miracle came after the decision. Everyone saw Jericho fall. But Rahab had already made her choice before the miracle became visible. That is why Hebrews remembers her, and that is why James points to her. Rahab's faith was demonstrated by action. Behind that scarlet cord was not a perfect woman. There was a woman who had heard, believed, feared, acted, waited, and trusted. That is why Rahab still matters. Because many people know what it feels like to have a complicated past and an uncertain future. Maybe your wall is fear. Maybe it is shame. Maybe it is rejection. Maybe it is the belief that your past has already decided your future. Rahab's story does not tell you that everything will suddenly become easy. It tells you to trust God enough to take the next faithful step. The walls of Jericho fell, but Rahab's story survived them. Her past did not destroy her future. Her faith became her legacy. Rahab teaches us that God does not always begin with the person who has the perfect past. Sometimes he begins with the person who is simply willing to trust him with the future. Rahab entered the story as a woman living inside Jericho. She emerged as a woman remembered for faith. She chose courage over fear, action over hesitation, and trust over visible security. The walls fell, but her faith remained. And her story still asks us one question. When your walls begin to shake, who will you trust? If you watched this entire Bible character deep dive, comment, faith, and tell us the country you're watching from. If Rahab's story encouraged you, like this video. Share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to Bible Uncovered for more deep dives into the people, struggles, failures, faith, and hidden lessons of Scripture.